The humidity hit me like a wall the moment I stepped off the plane in Charleston. May in South Carolina always felt like breathing through wet cotton, but today the air carried something heavier. Storm clouds gathering on the horizon, and the weight of a family I'd spent 5 years avoiding. My phone buzzed as I waited for my rental car. A text from my mother. Rehearsal dinner at Magnolia Manor. 6 p.m. sharp, don't be late, Eli. Even her text sounded like commands. The drive through Charleston's historic district should have felt like coming home. Spanish moss draped the oak trees like funeral shrouds, and the pastel antebellum houses stood proud and pristine. But all I could think about was the last time I'd been here. Christmas, 3 years ago, when I'd finally told my parents exactly what I thought of their obsession with appearances. I'd left on Boxing Day and hadn't looked back. Until now. Until Tyler's wedding. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Magnolia Manor squatted like a wedding cake in the Garden District. All white columns and manicured gardens. Valets in crisp uniforms whisked away BMWs and Mercedes while guests in cocktail attire mingled on the veranda. I parked my modest rental between a Porsche and a Range Rover, feeling every bit the outsider I'd become. Eli! My mother's voice cut through the evening air. Marcia Morgan materialized in a navy dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent in Seattle. Her smile was camera-ready but didn't reach her eyes. There you are. We were starting to worry. Traffic, I lied, accepting her brief, perfunctory hug. My father approached, scotch in hand, silver hair perfectly styled despite the humidity. Peter Morgan had always looked like he belonged in a country club brochure, and he'd spent most of my childhood making sure that's exactly where we ended up. Son, he gripped my hand firmly. Good to see you. How's the, writing business? The pause before writing business said everything. In Peter Morgan's world, freelance journalism was an extended adolescence. Paying the bills, I said. Well, that's something. He gestured toward the crowd. Come on, let me introduce you to some people. The Caldwells are here. Brooks family. Old Charleston money. Good connections. Of course they were. Everything with my parents came down to connections, networks, climbing the social ladder one dinner party at a time. It's what had driven me to Seattle in the first place, the suffocating need to be seen with the right people, in the right places, saying the right things. I scanned the crowd for Tyler and found him near the bar, looking uncomfortably handsome in a navy blazer. At 28, my little brother had inherited our father's easy charm and our mother's ambition. He was laughing with a group of men who all looked like they'd stepped out of a golf magazine. Tyler, I approached with genuine warmth. Whatever complicated feelings I had about my parents, Tyler was still my brother. He turned, and for a moment his face lit up with the same grin I remembered from our childhood. Eli, man, you made it! He pulled me into a hug that felt real, not performed. I wasn't sure you'd come. Of course I came. It's your wedding. But as we talked, I noticed something off. Tyler kept checking his phone, his eyes darting around the room like he was looking for escape routes. The easy confidence I remembered seemed strained, performative. Are you nervous? I asked. Yeah, just the usual pre-wedding jitters. He drained his bourbon. You know how it is. I didn't, but I nodded anyway. Where's Grandma Loretta? I haven't seen her yet. Tyler's expression tightened, almost imperceptibly. Oh, she wasn't feeling well tonight. Decided to stay home. Something in his tone made me pause. Grandma Loretta helped raise us while our parents built their real estate empire. She was the one who taught me to read, who bandaged our scraped knees, who'd made us feel loved when our parents were too busy networking to notice we existed. The idea of her missing Tyler's wedding dinner seemed impossible. Is she okay? Should I call her? She's fine, really. Just tired. You know how it is with older folks. But I did know Loretta. And at 85, she was sharper and more energetic than most people half her age. This didn't feel right. Later, as the evening wound down and my parents worked the room like politicians at a fundraiser, I slipped outside to call Loretta. She answered on the second ring. "Eli, honey. How are you, sweetheart?" Her voice was warm as always, but I could hear something underneath. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment. "I'm good, Grandma. I'm in town for Tyler's wedding. I was surprised not to see you at the rehearsal dinner tonight." There was a long pause. "Well, baby, I wasn't invited." The words hit me like a slap. "What do you mean you weren't invited?" "Your mother called last week. Said they wanted to keep things small and intimate, just immediate family and the wedding party." Her laugh held no humor. "Apparently, I don't qualify as immediate family anymore." I felt anger rising in my chest. "Grandma, that's ridiculous. It's all right, Eli. I understand. Your parents have their vision for how things should be. I don't quite fit the image they're going for." "What image?" "Oh, sophisticated, refined. Not some old woman who still talks with her anns and laughs too loud." I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong. But deep down, I knew she wasn't. My parents had spent years polishing away anything that didn't fit their carefully crafted image. Our working-class roots, our grandmother's common background, anything that suggested we hadn't always belonged in Charleston's elite circles. "Are you coming to the wedding tomorrow?" "I don't think so, honey. I wasn't exactly invited to that either." The line went quiet except for the sound of my own breathing. "Eli, you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here. Grandma, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "It's not your fault, sweetheart. You can't control what other people do, but you can control what you do about it." After hanging up, I stood in the humid Charleston night feeling something shift inside me. For years, I'd told myself that staying away was the mature response to my family's dysfunction, but maybe silence wasn't maturity. Maybe it was cowardice. The storm clouds were gathering overhead, and I had a feeling tomorrow was going to bring more than just rain. I arrived at Grandma Loretta's house the next morning with coffee and beignets from her favorite bakery. Her little shotgun house sat in a neighborhood that gentrification hadn't quite reached yet, where front porches still had rocking chairs and neighbors still waved. She answered the door in a floral housecoat, her silver hair pinned up in rollers. At 85, Loretta Morgan was still beautiful, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and hands that never seemed to stop moving when she talked. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," she said, but she was smiling as she pulled me into a hug that smelled like lavender and decades of love. Her living room was exactly as I remembered. Faded floral furniture, photographs covering every surface, and an old record player in the corner. She put on some Miles Davis and poured tea from a china set that had been her mother's. "Now," she said, settling into her favorite chair, "tell me about Seattle. Are you happy?" It was such a simple question, but it caught me off guard. When was the last time someone asked if I was happy, not how business was or whether I was dating anyone? "I think so," I said. "I mean, I'm doing work I care about. I have friends. It's a good life. That's not the same as happy, you know." She was right, as usual. "I'm content, which feels like enough most days." She sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Your grandfather used to say that contentment was just happiness with its shoes off. Comfortable, but not ready to dance." I laughed despite myself. Grandpa Joe had been gone for 15 years, but his sayings lived on through Loretta. "Grandma, about last night?" "Oh, honey, don't you worry about that. I've made peace with it." "But it's not right. You raised us. You were more of a parent to Tyler and me than your actual parents. Now, that's not entirely fair. Your mom and dad were working hard, building something for your future. They were building their image. Same thing in their minds." She leaned forward. "Your parents aren't bad people, Eli. They're just scared people. Scared they don't belong.
Scared they'll lose what they've worked for. Scared of being seen as less than. Fear makes people do ugly things sometimes. It was classic Loretta, finding empathy even for the people who'd hurt her. Does Tyler know? About you not being invited? Her expression grew sad. He knows. Called me last Tuesday, all apologetic and stumbling over his words. Said it was out of his hands, that Brooke's parents had very specific ideas about the guest list. That's bullshit. Language, Eli Morgan. Sorry, but it is. She chuckled. Yes, it is. But Tyler's caught between worlds right now. He's trying to be the man his new family expects, while forgetting the family that made him who he is. Sometimes people need reminding about their roots. Something in her tone made me look at her more closely. Grandma, what are you planning? Who says I'm planning anything? You get that look when you're scheming. You had the same expression right before you toilet papered Principal Henderson's house after he suspended me for defending Jimmy Carlisle from those bullies. I never toilet papered anyone's house. You bought the toilet paper. I might have purchased some household supplies. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to Miles Davis and the distant rumble of thunder. Storm clouds were building outside, turning the morning light gray and heavy. Tell me about Brooke, I said. Do you like her? She seems sweet enough. Pretty girl. Well-mannered. Comes from good people, from what I hear. But? No but. I hope she makes Tyler happy. I just wish... She trailed off. I wish she knew the Tyler I helped raise. The boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them golden roses, who cried when we had to put down Old Blue because he said it wasn't fair for dogs to die before their people, who used to sit right there on that couch and let me read him stories until he fell asleep. My throat tightened. I remembered that Tyler too, before our parents' ambitions and expectations had slowly carved away everything soft and genuine about him. Maybe she'll get to meet that Tyler eventually. Maybe, if he remembers how to be him. I stayed for another hour, listening to her stories about our childhood, stories our parents would probably prefer stayed buried. When I finally got up to leave, she walked me to the door. Eli, honey, yeah? Whatever happens today, you remember that love isn't always convenient. Sometimes it's messy and uncomfortable and requires you to speak up when staying quiet would be easier. Are you going to the wedding, Grandma? She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that got me into trouble as a kid when I'd followed her lead into some gentle mischief. Well, I wasn't exactly invited. But then again, nobody specifically told me I couldn't come either. As I drove back toward town, the first drops of rain began to fall. I found my parents at the wedding venue, Riverfront Gardens, an antebellum mansion turned event space overlooking the Ashley River. They were directing staff with military precision, my mother checking items off a clipboard while my father gestured toward flower arrangements like a general positioning troops. There you are, Mom said without looking up. We need you for pictures in 20 minutes. The photographer wants family shots before guests start arriving. I need to talk to you both first. Something in my tone made them both stop and look at me. What's wrong? Dad asked. Why wasn't Grandma Loretta invited to the rehearsal dinner or the wedding? My parents exchanged a look, the kind of silent communication that comes from 30 years of marriage and mutual ambition. Eli, Mom said carefully, we went over the guest list very thoroughly. We had to make some difficult choices about...
She's your mother, I said to Dad. She raised your sons while you were building your business empire. And you're excluding her because, why? She's embarrassing? Dad's jaw tightened. That's not what this is about. Then what is it about? It's about respect, Mom jumped in. Respect for what Tyler and Brooke want for their special day. The Caldwells are very traditional people with certain expectations. Expectations that don't include Tyler's grandmother? Expectations about decorum and appropriateness, Mom snapped, her composure cracking slightly. Your grandmother is a lovely woman, but she can be unpredictable. Unpredictable how? She speaks her mind, sometimes inappropriately, sometimes loudly. This is an important day for Tyler's future, and we can't have any complications. The word complications hung in the air like a slur. So you'd rather pretend she doesn't exist? We're not pretending anything, Mom said. We're being practical. We're trying to ensure Tyler has the best possible start with his new family. By denying his old family? You're being dramatic, Eli. This is about one day, one event. It's about respect. It's about loyalty. It's about remembering where we came from instead of being ashamed of it. Tyler appeared from around the corner, looking sharp in his wedding day suit but pale around the edges. Behind him walked Brooke, petite, elegant, with kind eyes that seemed to take in everything. "What's going on?" Tyler asked, clearly picking up on the tension. "Your brother has concerns about the guest list," Mom said tightly. Tyler's shoulders sagged slightly. "Eli, we talked about this. No, you deflected this. There's a difference." "Look, I know it's not ideal, but Brooke's parents have very specific ideas about—" "Stop!" I held up a hand. "Just stop. Don't blame this on Brooke or her parents. This is about you being embarrassed by the woman who taught you to tie your shoes and helped you with your homework and sang you to sleep when you had nightmares." "That's not fair," Tyler said quietly. "What's not fair is leaving her out in the cold because she doesn't fit your new image." Brooke stepped forward. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Who are we talking about?" Another exchanged look between my parents. Tyler opened his mouth, then closed it again. "Tyler's grandmother," I said when no one else seemed willing to speak. "Loretta Morgan, the woman who helped raise us." "But I thought—" Brooke looked confused. "I asked about grandparents, and you said they'd all passed away." The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler had the grace to look ashamed. "I said most of them had passed away." "Most of them?" "Loretta is still alive, still sharp as a tack, still living in the same house where she took care of us while our parents built their business. She just doesn't fit the image they want to project to your family." "That's enough," Dad said sharply. "Eli, you're out of line." "Am I? For wanting to honor the woman who raised us? For thinking she deserves better than being erased from her own grandson's wedding?" "You don't understand the complexities," Mom started. "I understand perfectly. I understand that you're so busy trying to impress people who don't really know you that you've forgotten who actually loves you." Thunder rumbled overhead, and the first heavy drops of rain began to spatter the windows. Brooke was staring at Tyler with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You told me your grandmother was dead." "I never said she was dead," Tyler said weakly. "I said she wasn't available. Because you didn't invite her." It wasn't a question. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the roof with increasing intensity. Through the windows, I could see guests arriving under umbrellas, valets running to escort them inside. "I need some air," Tyler said, and walked away. Brooke watched him go, then turned to me. "What's she like, your grandmother?" "She's wonderful. Funny, wise, stubborn as hell. She has more integrity in her little finger than—" I caught myself before I said something I'd regret. "She's the best of us."
"I'd like to meet her," Brooke said quietly. "Brooke," Mom said in warning. "I'd like to meet Tyler's grandmother," Brooke repeated more firmly this time. But before anyone could respond, Lionel Hart, the catering manager, appeared at my mother's elbow. "Mrs. Morgan, there's an elderly woman at the main entrance, asking about the wedding. She says she's family, but she's not on our list." My heart stopped. Through the rain-streaked windows, I could see a small figure in a dark dress standing under the portico without an umbrella, soaked to the skin. "Tell her she needs to leave," Mom said without hesitation. Immediately. Mom, I said, a warning in my voice. She's not invited, Eli. I won't have her disrupting Tyler's day. But as I looked out at my grandmother, standing in the rain, dignified despite being unwelcome, I realized something had shifted inside me. I was done staying quiet. I was done being complicit. Then you'll have to choose, her or me, because I'm not staying for a wedding that treats her like she doesn't exist. The rain pounded harder against the windows, and I could see Grandma Loretta still standing there, waiting. The morning of Tyler's wedding dawned gray and heavy with the promise of rain. I'd spent a sleepless night in my hotel room replaying the confrontation with my parents and wondering what Grandma Loretta was planning. She'd always been unpredictable when she felt she was fighting for something that mattered. By 10 a.m., the parking lot at Riverfront Gardens was filling with luxury cars while staff members in black uniforms scurried around making last-minute preparations. The ceremony was set for noon with cocktails and reception to follow. Everything looked perfect if you didn't know about the family drama simmering beneath the surface. I arrived early, hoping to catch Tyler before he got too caught up in wedding day chaos. I found him in the groom's suite, standing before a full-length mirror while his best man fumbled with cufflinks. Tyler looked handsome in his custom tuxedo, but his face was pale and his hands were shaking slightly. "Hey," I said, dismissing the best man with a nod. "How are you holding up?" "He's like he's about to throw up," he admitted, "but I think that's normal." We stood in silence for a moment. Outside, the first rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. "Tyler, about yesterday." "Don't," he said quickly. "Please, Eli, not today. I know you're right about Grandma, okay? I know it's fucked up, but it's too late to change anything now." "It's not too late. You could call her. You could— And what? Destroy my relationship with Brooke's parents before it even begins? Ruin the day Brooke's been planning for months? Or you could stand up for the woman who loved you unconditionally?" He turned away from the mirror. "You think this is easy for me? You think I don't feel like shit about it? But I can't fix everything, Eli. I can't make everyone happy." "I'm not asking you to make everyone happy. I'm asking you to do what's right." "What's right for who?" Before I could answer, Brooke appeared in the doorway in her pre-ceremony dress, looking radiant despite the gray day. "Can I steal the groom for a minute?" I started to leave, but she stopped me. "Actually, Eli, I was hoping to talk to you too." She closed the door behind her and looked at both of us seriously. "I need to know about your grandmother." Tyler's jaw tightened. "Brooke, we've been through this." "No, we haven't. We've danced around it. But I need to understand what's happening here, because I've been thinking about it all night." "What do you want to know?" I asked. "Everything. Who she is, what she means to your family, why she's not here." So I told her about Grandma Loretta raising us while our parents worked, about her reading us stories and teaching us right from wrong, about her being the heart of our family before our parents decided she was a liability. Brooke listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled as the story went on. "She sounds wonderful." "She is." Brooke turned to Tyler. "Why didn't you tell me about her?"
"Because I knew you'd want to invite her, and I knew my parents wouldn't allow it." "Allow it? Tyler, this is our wedding. Don't we get to decide who we want to celebrate with us?" "You don't understand the politics involved." "I understand that you lied to me." Brooke's voice was quiet but firm. "I understand that you have a grandmother who helped raise you, and instead of being proud of that, you're ashamed of it." "I'm not ashamed of her." "Then why isn't she here?" Tyler had no answer for that. Outside, the rain was starting to fall in earnest, pattering against the windows with increasing intensity.
Guests were beginning to arrive, their umbrellas blooming like black flowers in the parking lot. "I want to meet her," Brooke said. "After the ceremony, I want you to take me to meet your grandmother." "Brooke!" "I'm serious, Tyler. This matters to me." A knock at the door interrupted them. Lionel Hart peered in, looking apologetic. "Excuse me, but there's a situation at the front entrance that requires your attention." "What kind of situation?" "An elderly woman. She says she's family, but she's not on the guest list. Security is asking how you'd like to handle it." Tyler closed his eyes. "Shit!" Through the window, I could see her, a small figure in a navy dress standing near the main entrance, rain beginning to darken her shoulders. Even from a distance, I recognized the proud set of her shoulders, the way she held herself with dignity despite being unwelcome. "That's her," Brooke said softly. "Isn't it?" I nodded, unable to speak. "She's getting soaked," Brooke observed. "The staff has instructions to not let her inside," Tyler said miserably. "Whose instructions?" "My parents." Brooke stared at him for a long moment, then turned to Lionel. "Can you please escort the lady inside, get her dried off, and find her a seat?" "Ma'am, I have specific orders." "From who?" "The mother of the groom." "Well, I'm the bride, and I'm giving you different orders." Tyler grabbed her arm gently. "Brooke, please. If we do this, my parents will never forgive us. And if we don't do this, will you forgive yourself?" The question hung in the air while rain drummed harder against the windows. Outside, Grandma Loretta stood in the growing storm, waiting. "She's gonna get sick," I said. "She's 85 years old, and she's standing in the rain because her own family won't let her inside." Brooke looked from Tyler to me, then back to Tyler. "This is your choice, Tyler. But choose fast, because I'm not starting my marriage by watching your grandmother get pneumonia in a parking lot." Thunder cracked overhead, sharp and close. The storm was here. By the time I made it outside, Grandma Loretta was thoroughly soaked. Rain had plastered her silver hair to her head and turned her navy dress 2 shades darker, but she stood with the same dignity she'd maintained her entire life. She'd found shelter under the entrance portico, but it wasn't much protection against the wind-driven rain. "Grandma," I called, jogging through the downpour. She turned and smiled as if standing in a thunderstorm at a wedding she wasn't invited to was the most natural thing in the world. "Hello, sweetheart. Lovely weather for a wedding, don't you think?" "What are you doing here?" "Well, I figured my grandson was getting married today, and I'd like to see it happen, even if I have to watch from the parking lot." "You can't stand out here in this rain. You'll catch your death. I've survived worse storms than this, Eli Morgan." Behind us, I could see wedding guests hurrying from their cars under umbrellas, shooting curious glances at the elderly woman who was clearly not supposed to be there. My parents were nowhere to be seen, probably inside orchestrating last-minute details and hoping the rain would drive Loretta away. "Come on," I said, taking her arm. "Let's get you inside." "I don't think that's such a good idea, honey. Your parents made it very clear I wasn't welcome." "Brooke wants to meet you, and this is her wedding too."
Loretta's eyebrows rose. "The bride wants to meet me?" "She does. She's not happy about the way you've been treated." "Smart girl." I was leading her toward a side entrance when Lionel Hart appeared, looking conflicted but determined. "Mrs. Morgan," Loretta said. "Loretta Morgan." "Mrs. Morgan, I'm Lionel Hart, the catering manager. I have towels and somewhere warm where you can dry off." "That's very kind of you, Mr. Hart, but I don't want to cause any trouble." "You're not causing trouble, ma'am. You're a guest who got caught in the rain." Lionel led us through the service entrance into a small staff break room. He disappeared for a moment and returned with fluffy white towels and a cup of hot coffee. "Thank you," Loretta said, accepting the towel gratefully. "You're very thoughtful." "Actually, Mrs. Morgan, I think we may have met before. Did you volunteer at the East Side Library Literacy Program about 10 years ago?" Loretta paused and toweling her hair. "Why, yes, I did. Every Tuesday evening." You helped me learn to read better. I was working 2 jobs and trying to finish my GED, struggling with comprehension. You were so patient with me." "Lionel Hart," she said slowly, recognition dawning. "My goodness, look at you now, a manager and everything." "Because of you, ma'am. You changed my life." I watched this exchange with growing emotion. This was who my parents were excluding, a woman who'd spent decades helping others, who touched lives in ways they'd never know, a woman who'd helped a struggling young man learn to read, and now, years later, that same man was offering her kindness when her own family wouldn't. "Mrs. Morgan, would you like to watch the ceremony? I can arrange a seat for you." "That's very generous of you, but I wasn't invited. I don't want to cause a scene." "The bride specifically asked for you to be included." "She did. Tyler might be torn between worlds right now, but Brooke knows what's right." "Well," Loretta said, smoothing her damp hair, "I suppose I could stay for a little while, but I'll sit in the back. I don't want to overshadow anything." Lionel smiled. "Ma'am, something tells me you couldn't overshadow anything if you tried. You're the kind of person who makes everything else shine brighter." As we prepared to head to the main hall, Loretta caught my hand. "Eli, honey, are you sure about this? I don't want to cause problems between you and your parents." "Grandma, I've been avoiding problems with my parents for 5 years. Maybe it's time to face them head on." "That's my boy," she said, squeezing my hand. "Sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do." Through the windows we could see the rain beginning to ease, but the damage was done. Loretta had been left to stand in a storm while her family celebrated without her. But she'd weathered it with grace, as she weathered everything else. Now it was time to see if the rest of us could weather what came next. The ceremony was set in Riverfront Gardens' main ballroom, a grand space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Ashley River. Despite the storm, it looked magical. Hundreds of white roses and candles created a warm glow against the gray day outside. Lionel had found Loretta a seat in the very back row, partially hidden behind a large floral arrangement. She sat with perfect posture, her hands folded in her lap, looking every bit the dignified grandmother she'd always been. Her dress had mostly dried, though her hair was still slightly damp around the edges. I took my place in the front row, with the family, acutely aware of the empty space where she should have been sitting. My parents flanked me, Mom in an elegant rose-colored dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries, Dad in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. They looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine spread on Southern society weddings. The string quartet began the processional, and guests rose as the bridal party made their entrance. Tyler's groomsmen walked with military precision, followed by Brooke's bridesmaids in flowing sage-green dresses. Then came Brooke herself, radiant in ivory silk and her grandmother's pearl necklace, walking arm in arm with her father.
She looked beautiful, but I found myself watching Tyler instead. He stood at the altar beside Reverend Knox, looking handsome and nervous. His eyes swept the crowd, and I saw the exact moment when he spotted Grandma Loretta in the back row. His face went pale, then flushed, and he quickly looked away. But Brooke saw her too. As she walked down the aisle, her gaze found Loretta and stayed there for a long moment. Even from a distance, I could see her small nod of acknowledgement, a bride recognizing the woman who'd helped raise the man she was about to marry. Reverend Knox began with the standard wedding sermon about love and commitment, his voice carrying easily through the sound system. He was a tall, distinguished man who'd officiated dozens of high-society Charleston weddings. This was clearly just another performance to him. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Tyler Morgan and Brooke Caldwell in holy matrimony." The words washed over me, familiar and hollow. I found myself thinking about real love, the kind Grandma Loretta had shown us every day, the kind that didn't require performances or perfect settings, the kind that showed up in thunderstorms and never asked for anything in return. Tyler and Brooke recited their vows, beautiful, carefully crafted words about forever and devotion. Brooke's voice was clear and strong. Tyler's wavered slightly, and I wondered if it was from nerves or guilt. Do you, Tyler James Morgan, take Brooke Elizabeth Caldwell to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, till death do you part? I do. Do you, Brooke Elizabeth Caldwell, take Tyler James Morgan to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, till death do you part? I do. By the power vested in me by the state of South Carolina, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Tyler lifted Brooke's veil and kissed her as the crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, capturing the perfect moment for the perfect wedding album. But I kept thinking about the woman in the back row who'd helped shape the man now kissing his bride. The woman who should have been in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief and beaming with pride. As the newlyweds processed back down the aisle, Tyler's eyes found Loretta again. This time he didn't look away. For just a moment, his practiced smile faltered, and I saw the little boy she'd raised, the one who used to bring her dandelions and call them golden roses. Loretta smiled at him, not the hurt, disappointed smile I might have expected, but the same warm, loving smile she'd given us our entire lives. In that moment, I realized something profound. She hadn't come here to punish anyone or cause a scene. She'd come because she loved Tyler enough to witness his happiness, even if it meant standing in the rain to do it. But as I watched my parents' rigid postures and the careful way other guests avoided looking toward the back row, I knew this was far from over. The ceremony might be complete, but the real reckoning was just beginning. The reception moved to the adjacent ballroom, where round tables draped in ivory linens surrounded a polished dance floor. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over centerpieces of white roses and greenery, while a jazz quartet played softly in the corner. It was elegant, expensive, and exactly what my parents had envisioned. Loretta had somehow made it inside. I spotted her at a small table near the kitchen doors, the kind of spot usually reserved for distant relatives or plus ones nobody really wanted to seat. She sat alone, sipping water and watching the festivities with the same calm dignity she'd maintained all day. The speeches began after dinner. Brooke's father went first, delivering a polished toast about tradition and family legacy that sounded more like a board meeting presentation than a wedding blessing. Tyler's best man followed with predictable jokes about bachelor parties and ball and chains.
Then Dad stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of a man used to commanding rooms. "As Tyler's father, I want to say how proud Marcia and I are of the man he's become." I watched Tyler's face as Dad launched into a carefully crafted speech about success, ambition, and joining two distinguished Charleston families. Everything about hard work and building something lasting, nothing about love or happiness or the people who'd actually raised Tyler while Dad was building his empire. "Tyler has always been destined for great things," Dad continued, "and today, with Brooke by his side, he's beginning the next chapter of that story. We couldn't be prouder of the life he's chosen and the family he's joining." Polite applause rippled through the room. Mom dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, though I suspected the tears were more performance than genuine emotion. Then Loretta stood up. At first, nobody noticed. She was small and had been sitting in the shadows near the back.
But then Lionel appeared beside her, discreetly placing a wireless microphone in her hand. Later I would learn that he'd watched the entire ceremony, seen the way my parents had erased her from the narrative, and decided to give her a voice. "Excuse me," Loretta said, and suddenly her voice was filling the ballroom through the sound system. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. My parents looked like they'd seen a ghost. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she continued, walking slowly toward the front of the room, "but I have something I'd like to say about Tyler." "Ma'am," Reverend Knox started to intervene, "this isn't really appropriate." "Oh, hush," Loretta said mildly, and somehow her gentle authority was more commanding than his bluster. "I'll only take a minute." She reached the front of the room and turned to face the crowd. In her simple navy dress, still slightly wrinkled from the rain, she looked small among all the finery. But when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 8 decades of living. "My name was Loretta Morgan. I'm Tyler's grandmother, his father's mother, and I raised that boy." You could have heard a pin drop. "I raised him while his parents were building their business. I taught him to tie his shoes and read his first books. I bandaged his scraped knees and dried his tears when kids at school were mean to him. I taught him that being a gentleman means treating everyone with respect, not just the people who can do something for you." My parents looked mortified. Tyler had gone pale, but Brooke was watching Loretta with rapt attention. "Tyler used to bring me dandelions from the yard and tell me they were golden roses because he thought I deserved beautiful flowers, but we couldn't afford store-bought ones. He'd sit with me on Sunday afternoons and let me braid his hair while we listened to gospel music on the radio. He had the sweetest laugh. Still does when he lets himself use it." Tears were starting to blur my vision. I wasn't invited to this wedding, my own grandson's wedding, because his parents decided I didn't fit the image they wanted to project, because a woman who worked as a librarian and raised children with love instead of money might embarrass them in front of their new friends. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some guests looked shocked, others embarrassed for my parents. A few were pulling out their phones. "But I came anyway," Loretta said, her voice growing stronger. "Because that's what you do when you love someone. You show up, even when it's inconvenient, even when you're not wanted, even when you have to stand in the rain." She turned to look directly at Tyler, who was staring at her with tears streaming down his face. "Tyler, baby, I want you to remember who you are underneath all this fancy packaging. You're a good man with a kind heart who was raised to treat people with dignity. Don't let anyone, not even family, convince you that where you came from is something to be ashamed of." Then she turned to Brooke.
"And Brooke, sweetheart, you seem like a lovely girl. I hope you'll help Tyler remember the boy who brought me dandelions. Because that's the man worth marrying, not the one trying to impress people who don't really matter." Finally, she looked at my parents. "Peter, Marcia, you raised a wonderful son, even if you let someone else do most of the raising. But love isn't something you can schedule around business meetings. Family isn't something you can edit to fit your social calendar. And shame on you for teaching your children that their own grandmother is someone to be hidden away." The room was dead silent, except for the sound of rain against the windows. "That's all I wanted to say," Loretta concluded. "Tyler, I'm proud of you, baby. I always have been. And I hope you'll come see me sometime when you get back from your honeymoon. I'll make you sweet tea, and we can look at photo albums from when you still thought dandelions were golden roses." She handed the microphone back to Lionel and began walking toward the exit. For a moment, nobody moved. Then something beautiful happened. Brooke started clapping. Slowly, quietly at first, then with growing conviction. Other guests began to join her.
First a few scattered individuals, then whole tables. By the time Loretta reached the door, half the room was applauding. Tyler stood frozen at the head table, tears streaming down his face. Then, suddenly, he broke away from the wedding party and ran after her. "Grandma, wait!" She turned just as he reached her, and he pulled her into the kind of desperate hug I remembered from childhood, the kind that said, "Please don't ever let me go." "I'm sorry," he whispered, loud enough for the microphone system to pick up. "I'm so sorry, Grandma. I love you." "I love you too, baby. I always have." There wasn't a dry eye in the house. The reception never quite recovered its formal elegance after Grandma Loretta's speech. Some guests left immediately, muttering about inappropriate disruptions and social impropriety. Others lingered, seemingly energized by the burst of raw authenticity in an otherwise choreographed event. The jazz quartet kept playing, but the conversations had shifted from polite small talk to animated discussions about family, love, and what really mattered. I found Tyler and Loretta sitting together at her small table near the kitchen, holding hands and talking quietly. Brooke had joined them, still in her wedding dress, but looking more relaxed than she had all day. When I approached, I could hear Loretta telling stories about Tyler's childhood, the kind of stories my parents would have preferred stayed buried. "And then you tried to give that stray cat a bath in the kitchen sink," she was saying, laughing. "Poor thing nearly clawed the curtains to shreds trying to escape." "Mr. Whiskers," Tyler said, actually smiling for the first time all day. "I was convinced he was dirty because he was gray. You cried for 3 days when we explained that was just his natural color." Brooke was watching Tyler with an expression of wonder, as if she was seeing a different person than the man she'd married an hour earlier. "I wish I could have grown up knowing you," she said to Loretta. "Tyler's told me so little about his childhood." "Well, there's time to fix that now," she replied, "if you'd like." Meanwhile, my parents were holding damage control court near the bar, surrounded by concerned friends and family members. I could hear fragments of their explanations. Very emotional day, not herself lately, family complications, but their usual smooth confidence had been badly shaken. I was debating whether to join Tyler's table or confront my parents when the decision was made for me. Dad appeared at my elbow, his face tight with controlled anger. "We need to talk. Now." He steered me toward a quiet corner, with Mom following close behind. Both of them looked like they were barely containing their fury. "Are you satisfied?" Mom hissed, keeping her voice low enough not to be overheard. "You've completely ruined Tyler's wedding day." "I didn't ruin anything. I didn't give Grandma that microphone. But you encouraged this. You brought her inside when we specifically—"
When you, specifically what? Decided to treat your own mother-in-law like a stranger? "That's not what happened," Dad said. "You're oversimplifying a complex situation. What's complex about it? You were embarrassed by the woman who raised your sons, so you excluded her from the most important day of Tyler's life." "We were trying to protect Tyler's future," Mom snapped. "The Caldwells are an influential family with important connections. We couldn't risk—" "Risk what? Risk them seeing that Tyler comes from people who actually love him? Risk them seeing that we come from... She gestured helplessly. "From what, Mom? From working people? From a woman who cleaned houses and raised children and sang in the church choir? From real life instead of whatever fantasy you've been selling?" Dad stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper.
You have no idea what we've sacrificed to get where we are, the work we've put in, the compromises we've made. You can afford to be idealistic because we've already done the hard work of building something." "You've built an image," I said. "You've built a lie. And now Tyler's going to spend his whole marriage pretending his grandmother doesn't exist so he can fit into a world that doesn't even know him. That's his choice to make. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been making his choices for him his whole life." Mom looked like she wanted to slap me. "You ungrateful—" "Mrs. Morgan?" We turned to find Brooke standing behind us, still holding her bouquet. Her expression was calm but determined. "I wanted to thank you for raising such a wonderful man. Tyler is lucky to come from a family with such strong values." Mom blinked, clearly not expecting thanks after the evening's drama. "However, I also wanted you to know that Mrs. Loretta is welcome in our home any time. I hope you'll reconsider your relationship with her, because I intend to have one." The implications hung in the air. Brooke was drawing a line. She would include Loretta in their lives whether my parents approved or not. "Of course," Mom said weakly. We all want what's best for Tyler." "Good. Then we understand each other." As she walked away, I felt something shift in the family dynamic. Brooke might look like the perfect society bride, but she had steel in her spine. Tyler had chosen better than he knew. "This isn't over," Dad said to me. "No, it's not. But maybe that's good. Maybe it's time we stopped pretending we're something we're not." I left them standing there and walked back towards Tyler's table, where my brother was laughing at another one of Grandma Loretta's stories. For the first time all day, he looked genuinely happy. Outside, the storm was finally breaking, and fingers of sunlight were beginning to pierce the clouds. 2 hours later, I sat in Grandma Loretta's living room, listening to Billie Holiday croon from the old record player as she made tea in the kitchen. We'd left the reception together, after Tyler and Brooke insisted on having a private moment to talk, about the future, about family, about what kind of life they wanted to build together. "How do you take your tea these days?" Loretta called from the kitchen. "You used to like it sweet enough to dissolve spoons." "Just a little sugar now. Age has made me more bitter." Her laugh floated through the doorway. "Age has made you more selective, honey. There's a difference." She returned with a tray bearing her mother's china service and a plate of store-bought cookies arranged as carefully as if she'd baked them herself. Despite everything that had happened, she looked more peaceful than I'd seen her in years. "Well," she said, settling into her favorite chair, "that was quite an afternoon." "I'm sorry it had to happen that way, Grandma. You deserved better." "Oh, sweetheart, don't apologize for other people's choices. I got exactly what I came for." Which was to remind Tyler who he is, to let Brooke see the family she's really marrying into, and to show your parents that love doesn't disappear just because it's inconvenient.
She poured tea with steady hands, the same hands that had braided my hair and taught me to tie my shoes, and held me when I cried over childhood heartbreaks. "Besides," she added with a mischievous smile, "I haven't had that much fun in years. Did you see Meredith Caldwell's face when I mentioned standing in the rain? I thought she might faint right into her shrimp cocktail." I laughed despite myself. "You're terrible." "I'm honest. There's a difference." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the rain pattering against the windows and the soft jazz flowing from the record player. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sweet with the smell of wet earth and growing things. "Eli, honey, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy in Seattle? Really happy, not just content?" The question caught me off guard, just like it had that morning. I think so. My work is good, I have friends, I'm independent." "That's not what I asked." I considered lying, giving her the easy answer. But after everything she'd shown me about courage and truth-telling, I owed her honesty.
No, I said finally. I'm not happy. I'm safe, which felt like enough after growing up here. But I'm not happy. What would make you happy? I don't know. Being closer to family, maybe? The family that matters, anyway? Doing work that feels more meaningful? Having someone to share things with? All of that sounds possible. Does it? Well, you could move back east. Not necessarily Charleston, but somewhere closer. You could write about things that matter to you instead of just things that pay the bills. And as for having someone to share things with, she smiled, that usually happens when you're living the kind of life you actually want, instead of the kind of life you think you should want. A knock at the door interrupted us. Loretta rose to answer it, and I heard familiar voices in the hallway. Tyler and Brooke, still in their wedding clothes, but looking windswept and happy. Grandma, Tyler said we wanted to thank you for everything. For today, but also for everything before today. You don't need to thank me for loving you, baby. That was never work. Brooke stepped forward, looking slightly nervous. Mrs. Morgan, I was wondering if you might teach me some of those stories about Tyler's childhood. I feel like I've been getting to know a stranger instead of my husband. I'd love that, sweetheart. Come by any time. I've got photo albums that go back to when this one was in diapers. Grandma, Tyler protested, but he was smiling. What? You had the cutest little bottom. Nothing to be ashamed of. We all laughed, and for a moment it felt like the family we should have been all along. Messy and real and full of love that didn't require performance or perfection. There's something else, Tyler said, reaching for Brooke's hand. We've been talking, and we want to do this right. The wedding today was what other people wanted, but we want to do something that's actually ours. What do you mean? I asked. We want to have another ceremony, Brooke said. Something small and simple, in Grandma's backyard maybe, with the people who actually know us. Would you be willing to host that? Loretta pressed her hand to her heart. Oh, my dear children, of course I would. And Eli? Tyler turned to me. Would you officiate? I know you're not ordained or anything, but we can figure out the legal stuff. We just want someone who actually cares about us to say the words. I felt tears prick my eyes. I'd be honored.
As the evening wore on, we planned their real wedding, the one that would happen in 3 weeks in Grandma Loretta's garden, with folding chairs and homemade cake and all the love that had been missing from today's elaborate performance. When Tyler and Brooke finally left to begin their honeymoon, Loretta and I sat on her front porch, watching fireflies blink in the humid night air. You know, she said, I think today might have been exactly what this family needed. A public humiliation? A public reckoning. Sometimes love has to get loud before people start listening. A car pulled up to the curb, my parents' Mercedes. They sat in the driveway for a long moment before Dad finally got out and walked slowly toward the porch. Mom stayed in the car. Loretta, he said, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. Can we talk? Peter, come sit. He climbed the steps and took the chair beside her, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. Several apologies, actually. For today, for the years before today, for forgetting what you mean to this family. I know you were trying to protect Tyler in your own way, Loretta said gently. I was trying to protect myself, my image, my standing, my idea of where we belonged. I forgot that family isn't something you edit for public consumption. They talked for another hour, about the past, about regrets, and about the possibility of doing better going forward. It wasn't a complete healing, but it was a start. After Dad left, Loretta and I sat in the gathering darkness, listening to the night sounds of Charleston, crickets and distant traffic, and the whisper of Spanish moss in the evening breeze. "Grandma?" "Yes, honey?" "I think I want to come home. Not to Charleston necessarily, but closer. Maybe I could find a little place near here, do some freelance work, spend more time with family." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I think that sounds wonderful. But make sure you're coming toward something, not just running away from something else." "I am. I'm coming toward this, toward you, toward Tyler and Brooke, toward the kind of life where love matters more than appearances." "Then welcome home, sweetheart. Welcome home." 3 weeks later, I stood in Grandma Loretta's backyard, wearing khakis and a button-down shirt instead of a tuxedo, holding a folder of notes that I'd written for Tyler and Brooke's second wedding ceremony. The morning was bright and clear, with a gentle breeze stirring the magnolia trees and the scent of gardenias heavy in the air. 20 folding chairs arranged in 2 small sections faced a simple arbor that Tyler and I had built from branches in Loretta's garden. White ribbons fluttered from the posts, and mason jars filled with wildflowers marked the aisle. It was everything the first wedding hadn't been: intimate, personal, and real. The guest list was small. Grandma Loretta in the front row wearing her best floral dress and a corsage Tyler had made from their own roses. My parents, who'd asked quietly if they could attend. Brooke's younger sister and her parents who'd driven down from Virginia. Lionel Hart and his partner. Reverend Mary Washington from Loretta's church, and a handful of friends who actually knew Tyler and Brooke as people rather than social media personas. My parents sat in the second row looking somewhat out of place without their usual formal attire, but trying to adapt to the casual atmosphere. Mom even helped Loretta arrange flowers that morning, their first real conversation in years. Brooke appeared at the back of the yard in a simple white sundress and her grandmother's pearl earrings, carrying a bouquet of the same wildflowers that decorated the chairs. She looked radiant in a way that had nothing to do with professional makeup or expensive gowns, the kind of beauty that comes from genuine happiness. Tyler stood beside me in navy pants and a white shirt, no tie, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him since childhood. As Brooke walked toward us, no processional music, just birds singing and the soft sound of her bare feet on grass, his face lit up with pure joy.
"Friends and family," I began when Brooke reached the arbor, "we're gathered here today to witness Tyler and Brooke renew their commitment to each other, not because they have to, but because they want to. Because they've chosen to build a marriage based on truth rather than expectations, on love rather than image." I looked out at the small group assembled in the garden. 3 weeks ago, these two got married in front of 200 people at an elegant venue with crystal chandeliers and a professional photographer. Today, they're getting married in front of the people who actually know them, in a garden tended by the woman who taught Tyler what love looks like when it's given freely and without conditions. Grandma Loretta dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, beaming. "Tyler, when we were kids, Grandma used to tell us that the best marriages were like gardens. They required daily tending, patience with the seasons, and faith that beauty would grow from ordinary soil. Today, you and Brooke are planting something together in the place where you first learned what it means to nurture love." I turned to the couple. "Do you have vows you'd like to share?" Tyler took Brooke's hands, his voice steady and clear. "Brooke, 3 weeks ago, I promised to love you for better or worse, but I was still trying to be someone I thought you wanted me to be. Today, I'm promising to love you as myself, the man my grandmother raised, the one who believes in kindness over status and family over appearances. I promise to never again be ashamed of where I come from, because it's what brought me to you." Brooke's eyes were bright with tears. "Tyler, I fell in love with glimpses of the real you, the man who notices when waiters are having a bad day, who remembers people's birthdays, who tears up at dog videos. Today, I'm promising to love
all of you, including the parts you were taught to hide. I promise to help you remember that you're worthy of love exactly as you are." They exchanged simple gold bands, Tyler's grandfather's ring that Loretta had saved, and a vintage band they'd found at an antique shop on King Street. "Tyler and Brooke," I said, "by the power vested in me by the internet ordination I got last Tuesday night, and more importantly, by the love that surrounds you here today, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Again, for real this time." Tyler kissed Brooke as a little gathering erupted in cheers and applause. Someone, I think it was Lionel, whistled loudly enough to startle the birds from the magnolia tree. The reception was held right there in the garden, with a buffet table made from sawhorses and plywood covered with Loretta's best tablecloth. The cake was a simple 2-layer creation that Brooke's sister had baked, decorated with fresh flowers from the garden. There was no DJ, just a playlist streaming from someone's phone, and a small dance floor made of plywood Tyler and I had installed that morning. But it was perfect, absolutely perfect. Dad asked Loretta to dance to an old Nat King Cole song, and for a moment they looked like the family they should have been all along. Mom chatted easily with Brooke's parents about gardening and grandchildren to come. Tyler spun his bride around the makeshift dance floor, both of them laughing like teenagers. Later, as the afternoon wound down and guests began to say their goodbyes, I found myself alone with Loretta on her back porch, watching Tyler and Brooke pack up leftover cake and flowers. "Now that," she said with satisfaction, "was a proper wedding." "It was perfect," I agreed. "You did good today, honey. That was a beautiful ceremony. I learned from the best. You've been teaching us about real love our whole lives." She squeezed my hand. "Love isn't complicated, Eli. People make it complicated. But at its heart, it's just showing up for each other day after day, storm after storm. That's what Tyler and Brooke have chosen today. That's what you chose when you stood by me 3 weeks ago." Tyler and Brooke approached the porch, both glowing with happiness.
"Grandma," Tyler said, "thank you for everything. For raising me right, for never giving up on me, for showing me what real love looks like. For standing in the rain," Brooke added softly. "Oh, honey," Loretta said, standing to embrace them both. "That wasn't about standing in the rain. That was about staying put when love calls you to be brave." As the newlyweds drove away for their second, simpler honeymoon, a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains instead of a luxury resort in the Caribbean, I helped Loretta clean up the garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and fireflies were beginning to blink among the magnolia leaves. "Eli," Loretta said as we stacked chairs, "I have something to tell you." "What's that?" "I've been thinking about selling this house. It's getting too big for an old woman, and the neighborhood's changing anyway." My heart sank. "Where will you go?" "Well, I was hoping you might help me find a little place. Maybe one with a guest room for a grandson who's thinking about moving back east." I stopped stacking chairs and looked at her. "You'd want that? Me living nearby?" "Honey, I've been waiting for you to come home for 5 years. Not to Charleston necessarily, but home to yourself. Home to the person you were raised to be." I hugged her then, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender and love that had defined my childhood. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, baby. Now come on, let's get these dishes washed. Tomorrow's another day, and there's always more love to tend." As we worked together in her little kitchen, with jazz playing softly from the old record player, and the night settling gently around us, I realized something profound. I was finally home. Not to a place, but to a way of being in the world, one where love mattered more than appearances, where family was defined by devotion rather than genetics, and where standing in the rain for someone you loved wasn't sacrifice, but privilege. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, another storm approaching. But I wasn't worried. I'd learned something important about weathering storms. You don't have to face them alone. And sometimes, the most beautiful things grow from the rain. 3 months later, I bought a little house 2 miles from Grandma Loretta's new apartment, started a freelance writing business focused on stories that mattered, and began dating a librarian who laughed at my jokes and didn't care that I'd rather spend Saturday night playing Scrabble with my grandmother than networking at charity galas. Tyler and Brooke had Sunday dinner with us every week, sharing stories and dreams, and the kind of easy affection that comes from being genuinely known and loved. And sometimes, when storms rolled through Charleston, I'd sit on my front porch and think about that day at Tyler's wedding, the day my grandmother stood in the rain and taught us all what love looks like when it refuses to be hidden, diminished, or denied. The day she drenched us all in truth, and we finally learned how to be a real family. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.